All right, everybody, back down here in the basement. I'm on my way back. I just got back last night from Pirate City in Bradenton, checking out the big league club, but also a decent amount of minor leaguers over there at Pirate City. Got to see some sim games. I talk about a little bit of that there. Maybe when me and Chris talk next time. I'm still like riding on a high, but I mean I'm kind of exhausted here. But you know what's coming up next? We went to Bradenton. We came up north to Greensboro, and now we're headed over to Altoona. I'm just going to say my favorite team, been my team for a long time. When people say who's your favorite, Pirates minor league team, I mean, I don't care who's on it's Altoona, man. And you can see the hat. I got the gear. I got Altoona sitting here. I got my Adam Heisdu bobblehead, man. I am ready for curve baseball. And to do that, I am bringing on, for the first time on this show, I believe maybe the second time overall on Bucks in the Basement, play-by-play guy for the Altoona Curve, John Moses. That's no H and at spelled with a Z. John, how you doing today, brother?
Doing great, man. Crossover season is fun for me because I'm covering a lot of basketball. So spent last weekend at the Ivy League tournament at Princeton, and now I'm back into baseball mode today for a couple days before we go to the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, you're rocking, what is it, the Princeton women's basketball hat, the beanie, or what? I don't know what everybody would call it. I call it a tassel cap.
Well, so this is actually a Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl champion hat, which
Oh my God,
I
why'd
think
you
is very
do that to
important to
me?
note.
Why did you
Well,
do that to me, brother? I mean, I'll take it. I like you, so I'll let it slide.
hey, man, one of the biggest sports stories that will never be matched in my lifetime is Nick Foles being the Super Bowl MVP in a game that Tom Brady played in. And even I say that out loud now, 6 years later, and after my team was just to the Super Bowl again, nothing will top that moment for me.
Yeah, those are like a bunch of things that shouldn't go into sentences together. So it's definitely it's one for the ages. But we're here to talk some curve baseball. Like I said before, I mean Altoona. I grew up just outside of Indiana, PA. Altoona was a quick shot there. I still only live about an hour and a half away. Make it out to as many games as possible. Unfortunately, it's not going to be until Mother's Day this year. Going to take my mom up there. She loves curve baseball, take the kids and everything and celebrate that Saturday before Mother's Day. I usually like to try to make it to the opener, but with it being on the day before the home opener here in Pittsburgh, that makes it just a tiny bit difficult. So wasn't able to swing that, but we're going to talk some curve baseball here. Last year, coming into the season, the curve had a lot of buzz around them. Just because, you had Nick Gonzalez there. You knew Henry Davis was going to get there at some point. I mean, a rotation supposed to be filled with, Quinn Priester, Mike Burrows, Carmen Majinski, Kyle Nicholas. You have all these guys, Omar Cruz. And it just kind of, Matt Frazier. Matt Frazier after his breakout season. I knew I was going to forget somebody because there was just so much stuff going on there. And then I wouldn't say the curve fell flat. I mean, every single time I looked at it, was competitive and different stuff, but nobody, I mean, outside of Burrows, that hot season, I mean, you end up with Quinn on the shelf to begin the season. So last year, definitely not what we wanted to see from the curve.
Yeah, I mean, injury was just a big part of it. I mean, you're talking about at the beginning of the season, somebody they were expecting to start opening day, Quinn Priester, in his last spring training outing, pulls his oblique. And, it was really a difficult task for manager Kyron Madison and his staff to just sort of handle everything day to day, because there was legitimately 7 or 8 prospects in that roster, in that opening day lineup, and Andres Alvarez didn't play on opening day. And then he goes and hits 20 homers and steals 20 bases. And, that was an unfortunate part of the story for the 2022 curve, is that, injuries knocked guys out for extended periods of time. Henry Davis arrived with a thump and then missed time and then came back and then missed more time and then, got some final at-bats down the stretch of the season. Adding Endy Rodriguez, Matt Gorski as the year went on. I mean, it's a pretty incredibly talented group that has come through Altoona last year and that I expect will start the year in Altoona this year.
Yeah, and the last game that I went to out there, beautiful PNG. I love the view. I can't get enough of it. I got to see them face pretty much the number one pitching prospect in baseball and Painter from the Phillies organization. And as we were walking in, me and my the two oldest ones, Nicky G hits a home run. A little bit later, Henry Davis hits a home run off of him. I and there was just like that, just tons of excitement about what was going on, and I I'm looking forward to that this year. And we talked. I talked to Ben Picorni, talked to Anthony Murphy. We've gone up through the system so far, as I said, and we said there's like this little ebb and flow of like, you know, trickling up and the trickling down effect. I mean, right now, I look at the Indianapolis roster, and it's kind of full. And I know John Baker had said at some point during this offseason, the guys may end up starting in Altoona just because of there being such a full roster in Indianapolis. I mean, like the rotation, everything like that. Do you have any idea on maybe some of those guys? I'm thinking like maybe like a Henry Davis starting in Altoona again. Maybe even I hate to say, maybe even like Kyle Nicholas. That rotation is going to be so full up there, and if those guys are all in the rotation, I mean, even if they would use the six man to begin the season, like the minor leagues have done in the past, but kind of got away from towards the end of last year, except for Bradenton, there could be guys that maybe are ready for Indianapolis, kind of starting out in Altoona.
Yeah, I think you mentioned Kyle Nicholas. I would say that like he and Carmen Majinski are probably in the rotation to start the year in Altoona. Those two guys, sort of had proved some things last year in terms of health, right? Like Majinski missed a little bit of time. He missed like 1 week early in the year. Same with Nicholas, where he missed a start. But just seeing health for those guys and I'm doing this too, where I'm sort of looking around because I'm making player profiles for my media guide, and I'm trying to like guess at the 40 guys that have a chance to like start the year in Altoona or be close at this time of year. Um, and it's going to get pretty crowded at AAA. I mean, just look at last year, right? Tucapito Marcano opens at Altoona, and he is a guy that had been playing at AAA and in the big leagues previously. So, it's one of those good problems to have a lot of talent that trickles down from the major league roster and pushes guys down, because I think it just sort of raises the competition level between players where they say, okay, I have to prove to these guys that I should be in Indianapolis or that I should be on the big league roster.
And Ben Charrington has kind of shown that he's not afraid to make that promotion from Altoona if he believes that a player is ready. And sometimes it's also out of a convenience factor because of, if Altoona is at home and it's an hour and a half away, then, you may not have the ability to call up that guy from AAA who they might be like in Iowa or God knows where they, you know what I mean, to try to get a flight back here to Pittsburgh. And I mean, we saw that happen with Leover Peguero last year, getting his like little cup of coffee there just because, he was in Altoona. And I mean, he had been playing well, so we knew that he was ready. But this year, I mean, I still look and I see a decent amount of top prospects that could find their way there. The one that excites me the most, I can't wait to see him live because I haven't yet at this point in time. I've seen him, through the streaming and everything like that. But Dario Lopez, I cannot wait to watch that guy arrive in Altoona.
Yeah, heard some great things. I did an interview with Johnny Tucker, who's the hitting coordinator on the minor league side for the Pirates, and he and I were chit chatting a little bit, and I asked him, who's somebody that Curve fans can look forward to seeing at some point in 2023, and he said Dario Lopez was somebody that was pretty exciting to him, and that they think he's got a pretty bright future with the bats. So remains to be seen whether he opens with Altoona, but it's always good to have more of those guys sort of on the way. You'd rather have the problem of, hey, we have too many good third basemen than being short a third baseman in the big leagues,
Yeah, and Altoona has been a place, in recent history here where that's some of that outfield depth. And once again, I mean, the major league roster, you look at AAA, you look at different stuff like that, but Who are you looking for possibly like on your mind as to, maybe across the board, like who could be from like left to right, like who could be in that outfield this year?
I would say Matt Gorski is probably opening in center field, is my guess. I would think Matt Frazier is there as well, and Lolo Sanchez and Connor Scott, right? Like, I think that's probably the group of four outfielders that'll open in Altoona this year. Had Gorski stayed healthy, he had a chance at a 30-30 season. But, ends up missing all of July and all of August, and he gets back just in time to, get a few at bats at the end of the year. And then he ends up in Indy, where I think he played one or two games and then got hurt again. So, if Gorski can stay on the field, I think he's got a lot of upside, a lot of potential. Lolo Sanchez had just started to put it together when he hurt his oblique last year. So there's a couple of guys that like you've seen the ability, you've seen them be able to do it and do it well at this level. But you've got to see it a little bit more consistently and see them stay on the field. I think Connor Scott went through a lot of growth last year. He's a guy that, if he adds a little bit of power to his game, I mean, he could be a heck of a player in the big leagues just because, he may not be the fastest guy on the team, but he's a pretty good defensive player. I mean, he just gets great reads off the bat. And, if he goes from 7 to, say, 15 home runs for a full minor league season, then, I think it's a little bit easier to project him into a pretty good starting role in the big leagues.
Yeah, and one of the guys you mentioned there, and Lolo Sanchez got the quote unquote surprise, NRI, the non-roster invitee to spring training and launched a ball. And I know that it's Bradenton, but people have been like, well, isn't Lolo Sanchez about 30 years old by now? Because he's been in our system for so long. But he's still a young kid. He's not that old whatsoever. And he looks that's just the growth of a player. Like when you draft a player or you sign a player international, whatever it would be, you're trying to project what this skinny little kid is gonna come into. And when I saw him out there, I'm like, that can't be Lolo Sanchez. I remember him being like 165 pounds. He's grown into his body, and a lot of times that changes swings, that changes workout regimens. It changes a bunch of different stuff, so that they have to kind of adjust, like as we adjust as we get older. They have to adjust to playing baseball in a different fashion.
Totally. I mean, prospect fatigue is like a real thing, right? Lolo signed in 2015, right? So you've been hearing his name now for 7 years.
Yeah.
But he's got a lot of ability, man. Like his speed, he can play all three spots in the outfield. I think he can handle that in the big leagues at some point. And he's got a pretty good eye at the plate. Like I think that's important too, that his pitch recognition is good. He's not shy about walking, right? Like I think that's sort of a skill maybe we've lost some, throughout the game over the last couple of years here, where, guys are selling out more for power and trying to, hit 35 to 40 homers in a year. But those guys that work deep at bats, you need them in your lineup. You need them on your team. And, Lolo really does that. So that's one reason I'm pretty high on him and would have liked to see him stay healthy all year last year. It's just because he gives you good at bats. He gives you competitive at bats every day. And look, he's also one of my favorite guys that I've gotten a chance to know over the last year or two here in Altoona. Like he's really fun. He's really nice. He doesn't speak perfect English, but he does speak English. You can sort of interact with him when you cross paths with him on the field or in the clubhouse. Yeah. But he's just got a great spirit about him. So I'm rooting for the guy. He's great.
Yeah, and one of the things that kind of just popped into my head here as we were talking, because I kind of looked down and I'm like, man, I wrote down Ricky DeVito's name for the bullpen there in Altoona this year, and I replaced him within the pitching staff with a guy they had picked up in Scott Randall in like a surprise trade to kind of get him to come in there. So it's looking at like that interchangeability and looking back to, Nick Garcia being traded for Connor Joe, possibly could have been in Altoona, but at some point in time, I mean, we're talking about how full these staffs are. But who are some pitchers you think that you're maybe like thinking are going to be in Altoona and you're kind of getting excited about a little bit to see them toe the rubber?
That's a great question. There were a couple guys there at the end of the year, J.C. Flowers and Tanaj Thomas, that were just throwing the ball so well that I was like, you got to make a spot for these guys at Indy. Like, um, it's a great question because the bullpen, I think, is probably the most fluid part of what Altoona's roster can be to start the year, especially right now. Right, we're still 3 weeks out from opening day, so you've got guys sort of trying to figure out who's going to be where. But I would expect a lot of guys to come back. Nick Domkowski's probably going to be back this year. I think he showed some pretty interesting things down the stretch of the season last year. Brad Case is a guy who pitched well, at times for Altoona last year. But, I wonder if the age factor that, he's going to be 26, 27 this year, I think. I wonder if maybe he pushes to AAA. And that's probably the hardest area of the team to project because the elite guys at the back end of the bullpen from last year, Tyler Samaniego, Colin Selby, Tanaj Thomas, J.C. Flowers, like it feels like those guys are going to push to AAA. Samaniego might open with Altoona just because he sort of got there at the end of May and then, was sort of the other closer over the course of the year for a little while there, the lefty closer, if you will. Tyler might end up opening with Altoona, and then, he might, after 6 or 7 weeks, if he's pitching the way he did last year, he's another guy that it's probably like, all right, let's challenge him at Indy and see if he can impact the big leagues at the end of the year.
And he closed out. We're recording here on a Monday. We're recording a little bit early. This isn't going to come out till Friday, but I think that Tyler, I think he closed, quote unquote, closed out the game yesterday in Bradenton that I was at. The 11-3 loss, but it has at least gotten some looks from in big league camp, and that's been really exciting to see. But one guy I saw over at Pirate City that kind of got me pretty darn excited, and that is Jared Jones, and he right now is, according to like multiple sites, and these are all doing the same thing that we're doing. You're more educated than I am. They're also more educated than I am. But I've seen, Jared Jones possibly targeted for a spot in the rotation in Altoona, which would be another aggressive move for him.
Yeah, right. It's his age 21 season coming up, right? Like these, guys pitching at AA at 21, that doesn't happen very often. That's one of those things where you sort of throw up a flag like, ooh, who's he? And, I've heard great things. I remember talking to one of our staff members last year over the course of the year, and he said to me, we were talking about, how good – it's funny, we were talking about Tyler Samaniego, actually, and how he has this big sweeping slider and, how it's, maybe one of the best in the organization. And I was asking him, I was like, who else is in that conversation, right? Like best breaking balls in the organization. And the staff member said to me, Jared Jones's slider is the one you got to be ready for. And, I was doing my research on him today. Actually, I'm putting him in my media guide because I think there's a chance he's going to be with the curve. And it looks like a pretty impactful 4-pitch mix with a big fastball in the high 90s. I mean, let's do it, man. I'm trying to see that.
Yeah, because when I saw him out on the mound, I'm like, I mean, I know I'm old. Anybody that's watching this on video, you're seeing the white and everything like that. But I'm like, man, he is just a kid. But when he throws the ball and when he gets on the mound, he is all business, and he does not pitch like a kid. He goes after hitters, and it's absolutely insane. And it was great to watch him pitch. Another guy that, I mean, I was pretty high on at the beginning of last season, and that was Omar Cruz. He did end up going out to the Arizona Fall League. Didn't pitch great. But he's another guy that was kind of like nicked up a little bit at times. I love watching his curveball. His curveball is like one of my favorite pitches to watch in the system.
Yeah, he's fun, man. I think at times he sort of got in trouble with throwing quality strikes. I think there's a difference, and it's part of the maturation of a young pitcher between just throwing strikes and throwing quality strikes. And when you get to AA, just being in the zone versus being in the areas that you want to be as a pitcher becomes a lot more pronounced. Because the hitters are better at this point. So I think, throwing more quality strikes and just throwing more strikes in general for Omar is pretty big. He's working behind in the count sometimes, but um, you know, with that curveball and with that changeup, he's got the tools. He maybe maybe if he can find another 2-3 miles an hour on his fastball velocity, I think that'll really make a difference for him to climb the chain and then eventually be successful in the big leagues. But his ability to go multiple innings is big. He can sort of swing back and forth. He sort of filled that role for Altoona where the Curve opened the season with sort of a group of piggyback guys, what they call length guys out of the bullpen. So the starters would go, I think it was the first 2 times through the rotation, 4 innings, then the next 2 turns, 5 innings. So you had a situation where it was like Bear Bellamy, Omar Cruz, JC Flowers, where they were sort of on a rotation where they would work as the follower and go multiple innings following those guys. And then eventually Cruz flipped roles with Travis McGregor, where Cruz started games and McGregor went to that sort of swing role out of the bullpen. So that ability to go multiple innings will serve him well down the road. But I'm looking for a little bit of growth from him. I mean, he's got a chance to push up there because, there's available left-handed innings that you need at some point here in the upper levels.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it. I forget who I even talked about it. Is Ben Charrington and even John Baker are very cognizant of the fact that there are so many innings that need to be pitched in a season, and putting together a pitching staff that's able to accommodate that. It's been a little bit tough over the past few years, both at the major and minor leagues, because of a pandemic shortened season, and then lockouts, and the minor leaguers were able to get down there and working out last year, but they maybe weren't having as much of iron shape, sharpens iron by going against the higher levels of competition at time. Because I mean, that is, I feel like it's extremely helpful to just, even if it's some of the veteran leadership from above the guys on the 40 man, just for the short time that they're down, there's a lot of stuff that they can learn from them. But one thing I definitely did want to ask you, John, before we get going here, is that who is, I don't want to say like a breakout guy, but you've mentioned Lolo and I've brought up some guys. Is there anybody that, as you've been like kind of like looking through your notes again, that you're thinking, man, I'm looking for big things from him this season? And it can be a pitcher, it can be a hitter, whatever is kind of like on the top of your mind here.
I'm looking for a bounce back year from Liover Peguero. After 2 months in Altoona, I thought he was going to hit his way out of the league. I mean, he was incredible the first 2 months of the year. And then I remember it very specifically. It was the first week of June. Bowie came in, Orioles affiliate, and they might have thrown him 3 fastballs the entire week. It was just spin, 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 and more spin. And he had the toughest week of his season. And, going forward there, it wasn't the same Peggy over the last 3 months of the season that we saw the first 2 months of the year. And I was really encouraged. I was reading Jason Mackey wrote on Liover a couple days ago, or maybe it was early last week. And, Liover was just talking about, I'm just more focused, and that he felt, and, I could sort of read through the quotes that he was a little bit more mature as a person. I mean, he's going to be 22 this year, right? Like, he's a puppy still,
yeah.
And, if he starts to make the routine play in the field, cleans up some of those errors, he can become a lot more trustworthy at shortstop. He's a guy that I could see playing in an all-star game, just with the way that he can swing the bat with power, with speed. And, he's another guy that has great personality and is super nice and makes connections with everybody in the clubhouse. So, he's a guy that I'm going to be watching pretty closely the first couple weeks of the season if he does open with Altoona, just to see what's different. Because I think that there's a chance that he sort of breaks out and hits for a high average and, hits for some serious impact for this team. He's a guy I'm pretty excited about. And then, his double play partner in the middle. Let's see a little bounce back from Nick Gonzalez this year. I mean, it sounds like he's been doing good things at spring training this year. I imagine you got a chance to see him last week when you were down in Bradenton. So I'm interested to see those two guys together because, there's obviously a lot invested from an organizational perspective in those two guys. So you want to see those guys sort of get to their full potential. And, shoot, if they get there, you've got two really darn good players up the middle.
Yeah, and what I was thinking about, I mean, a lot of people are probably like, once again, before we get out of here, I'm just gonna reiterate that John Baker had said, guys, because people are looking and they're saying, oh, Leo Peguero is not going to start in AAA. Well, that's terrible. That's not going to be good. Nick Gonzalez, but the competition, especially with, I can't wait till I can stop talking about the pandemic and talking about the effect of the realignments of, the system. But, these guys lost a year of development. These guys are being asked to, play at levels they may not have played at before. And especially for a guy like Nick Gonzalez, who like every year kind of seems to be a slow starter, just for, and then the bad part is once he gets going, then he got injured in Greensboro and
Yeah.
then in Altoona. But then when he comes back, he's on fire again. So I don't see that as a bad thing. And like I said, I could go back to the realignment thing. Is you're seeing a lot more like I feel like higher level of pitching. You're facing higher level of pitching in double A than you may have been facing, prior to, 2020. It's just kind of my opinion. It's just same with, I've looked at the FCL and I'm like, a lot more college guys go there, and you got college guys,
Mm.
and just the way it trickles up and down. So that's where, like, I don't think that people need to focus on the assignments as much. Just my opinion, amateur opinion is just, and to focus on, how they perform and how they show out over the first, month or two of the season, and kind of let things play out a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's a far different player development world since the pandemic, right? I mean, you've not had a normal spring training from a player development standpoint since 2019, right? Because 2020, everybody goes home, roughly around this time. We're recording this March 13th, right? Everybody goes home. 21 is a limited spring training where the big league guys come first, and then a month later, the minor league guys came. Last year was the big league lockout, so they didn't really play a ton of spring training games. And then this year you've got the World Baseball Classic, right, where guys are pulled away to play for their national teams. So there's not been a normal spring training for anybody. So that's why like the assignments at the beginning of the season are always a little bit taken with a grain of salt, right? Like player development guys, the people that are making these decisions, they're human beings too, right? They're taking their best guess as to what is the right level for a guy based on the information they have in front of them. So, it's each of the last 3 years now, they're working with far different information complexes than what they had prior to the pandemic. So, I think you're right in that it's wrong to sort of focus on, where a guy goes to start the year and whether it's good or bad for his career. Like, if a guy opens at double A and sets the world on fire, that's a good problem to have. Push him up to AAA. Great. you know? Um, yeah, I mean, I agree with some of your thought there that like, it's a weird time. It's difficult for sure.
Yeah. And, John, it's great to have you on again, man. And actually great to, kind of finally see you like in quote unquote in person and everything. But I will be, out in Altoona there at some point in time. And like I said, favorite ballpark, favorite team, always will be. The Curve have a special place in my heart. For those of you that don't, please go follow John Moses. That's without an H and at spelled with a Z, from the Altoona Curve. And if you're watching, I guess it's like any women's basketball coming up, some Princeton women's basketball coming
Let's
up.
do it, man. Yeah, I'm traveling with them. I didn't. Well, I got a text here. Let's see. Nope, didn't know yet. Okay. But yeah, we're Princeton women are their 10 seed in the NCAA tournament. We're going to Utah. University of Utah is the host, is the 2 seed, and they're going to play NC State Friday night. So I'll be on the radio call for that, which would be pretty fun. I was covering the Ivy League tournament last weekend, so yeah, man, this is the fun time of year, man, and hopefully Princeton gets 2 games out of it like they did last year.
That'd be awesome, man. Well, once again, I said thanks for having and coming back on, and I hope to do this again sometime, brother. All right.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
All right, guys, that was John Moses. I once again no H and spelled with a Z. Follow him. Follow the Curve. Go out to Curve games. Go out to any minor league baseball game that you can. But it's time to cue the music.
A pitcher of beer, a pitcher of beer. Let's order another pitcher of beer. That pitcher of beer should come over here. I love that pitcher of beer.
All right, guys. This time I had to cheat again because I couldn't make it up to Altoona. I mean, it's an hour and a half drive. Couldn't stop at Noblestein on the way up in Indiana. Couldn't make it to Levity. Couldn't make it to Railroad City. So I had to go a little bit further east for this time. But for this one, it's kind of a good cause. So I'm happy to do it. So take your road trip, make your way to historic Williamsport, Pennsylvania. New trail. I've been sipping on their hazy pale ale, only about 5.1% here. A great sipping beer. I mean, it's called Gearhead. I'm not a gearhead. I don't even know if I could ride a bike at this point in time because I can't tell you the last time I rode a bike, but I sure will drink this beer. This one's coming in for you guys that don't know the scale. This one's coming in at a 375 batting average, but the weighted boba, weighted based on batting average, comes down to about a 325 because this is one of my favorite, sipping hazies. The next one we have, this is the one, it's called Replenish IPA. It's a West Coast style. And any case that you buy of this, $1 goes towards replenishing trails and trees in Pennsylvania. So it goes to a good cause, and it's a really good beer. A little bit heavier, comes in for me, batting 350. But since it's for a good cause, I won't give it the normal deduction for IPAs. On this one, I'm only going down to 325. Go out and buy yourself a case of Replenish. And then the granddaddy, their old school one, the Broken Heels IPA, coming in at 350, bumping back down to 300 for the weighted based on batting average. And then I've realized, guys, I'm getting old because I don't drink as many double IPAs as I used to. Maybe like I said, maybe I'm just getting a little bit too old here, but they have the double Broken Heels IPA. That one's coming in at 9.2%. I mean, some people that drink like the heavier stouts and different stuff like that are looking at me and going, man, I drink one that's like 14%. You can handle a 9.2. Well, your boy can't handle a 9.2 as much as he used to. That one's coming in at 325. Bump that down to a 275 batting average. Once again, guys, this is New Trail Brewing. Thanking the guest, John Moses, for jumping back on again. I appreciate you guys listening to my little venture here on Minor League News and Brews. Next week, we'll be taking a trip out to Indiana, and luckily, I am going to Chicago this weekend, so I will be going through Indiana and going to pick up some local beers from there. It just kind of matched up perfectly for me. If you don't, go follow Minor League News and Brews, follow at Buck's Basement, watch as much minor league baseball as possible, and we'll talk to you again next week.